Good morning, friends and family. It's James with Crawlers and Customs, and this morning we're going to be taking a look at our FMS Smasher. So this is the V2, if you guys saw in the previous video, and I have done a portal flip, and this has some body mounts that we made to lift the body back up into a stock-ish position, but keeping the CG super low. All right, so what we're going to be doing today is we've got the metal transmission gears, heat sink, got the optional bearing kit because I know the V2 has less ball bearings and I guess some bushings in a few places. So if we find any bushings in the transmission area, we're going to pop some bearings in. And we've got the infamous high-speed motor. So as always, I'll drop links in the description below for all of these parts, and we're gonna get started. First thing, we'll show this body mount. Now this is something I'm still working on. I haven't really decided, oops, sorry, snap back in place. I haven't really decided what method we're going to use to actually secure this, whether it's going to be like the stock truck. You can kind of see what I did here is we've got the stock body clips and we've got this body offset a little bit to the back, because what happens when you do the portal flip, and this is the front axle, is with the portals below the axle, due to the caster angle, they're in front of the axle center line. If we flip the portals over, they actually move to behind the center line, and it shortens your wheelbase, probably, if I had to guess, I don't know, 5 or 6 millimeters. So we move the body back to sort of recenter it over the axles. All right, so I think first thing we're going to pop these 4 bolts out. I'm also going to get rid of the selector servo and the high speed, low speed. We're only going to run this truck in high speed. And a lot of this truck uses M2 hardware. Those can be a little finicky. So if you don't have a set of quality tools, these MIP drivers are awesome. And let's go ahead and start pulling this thing apart. All right, so I wanted to call this out. Some guys messaged me and sort of warned me that this high-speed motor with the pressed brass pinion might actually stick out too far from the transmission case, and it can actually rub up against this cover. So we're going to check that out as we sort of move along here. All right, so having the shift pin, which is this pin, pushed towards the outer gear case cover is your high-speed gears. You can see that output shaft here is spinning quite quickly. If we push it all the way to the other direction, it's kind of hard to hold it together here with no bolts. It spins that output shaft much, much more slowly, and that's your sort of rock crawler position that you can see coming around now. So we're going to lock it in this forward position, and maybe we'll make a little spacer for that. We're going to check it out now. All right, so we're back after a little break, and here's where we're at. Basically, this is the high and low speed selector with this little locking ring that engages the two gears. The selector shaft and the gears themselves are actually identical. They're mirrored. So what I did is we're going to pull this apart. And now when you get the metal drive shaft kit, you'll see that you have two of these keyed gears. Now we're only going to use one, again, because one of the gears is for the low speed, which we're going to lock out. So here's your engagement mechanism. Slides over this little hexagon shape, and it keys in. So that's what we want. We want that gear to stay in place without this moving. So what I did is I went into Fusion and I printed up a couple little pieces. So this is a 2mm spacer that slides over and sits on the hex there. And then this is a 3.3mm spacer with a little shoulder on it that will sit up against the bearing. So this total width inside to inside is 13mm, which is the same distance as the stock setup with the three little plastic gears. So the idea behind this is we'll be able to drop it in to the stock gear case, and we'll have a locked out high speed only without having to do anything else. So that seems like the ticket right there. So let's go ahead and swap out all the plastic gears for the metal gears that we've already got. Now I see this inner gear set as slightly taller. You can see the little shoulder there, slightly taller than the original set. So let's take some measurements. I heard there may have been some fitment issues with the aftermarket metal gears. So let's see what's going on. So I think one of the easiest ways is to simply stack these back up and measure across both. So we got about 13.6 to the bearing shoulders on these gears. Let's put the stock gears back on. Which was this one. And one of these. All right, so there's definitely a size difference. This being closer to 13 millimeters across shoulder to shoulder versus the 13.6. That 0.5 millimeter difference is enough to cause some fitment issues here. And I have heard of guys grinding the gears down, so let's see which one is actually the culprit. So we got about 9.5. We got about 9.8 here, so there's 0.3. Let's check the other gear. 375. And where did that one go? There it is. And 3.6. So yeah, both of the metal gears are slightly oversized. So let's put everything back, and we know we need to take about a 0.5 millimeter. Let's see which side so we can get everything lined up. So we're gonna drop in actually 375. All right, so for the stock setup, should be close to 13 millimeters. That's what I measured on the other gear set. So, yeah, pretty close to 13 millimeters. The metal gear set now about 13 and a half, 13.6 or so. So that 0.5 millimeter difference is going to be the culprit. So let's put this back together and see where we need to take some material off to get a nice fit here. So we know that this gear needs to drop in first. Like that. Then this gear, then this gear, and then our locked out gear with spacer. So we can do this a couple ways, but we definitely need to take off, and you can really visualize that 0.5 millimeter right there. We need to bring that down. So the easiest way is going to be to grind down about 0.5 millimeter off of this gear. The other one that concerns me is this gear as well, which is probably slightly thicker. So let's check that. This gearbox uses a lot of the same gears, just in different orientation. So again, 9.8. Let's take a look at the stock gear. 9.5. So really we need to take off a little bit, 0.3 or so of a millimeter here. And we want to do the same on both of these other gears. So I'm going to put it back together one more time because I want to see where we're going to pull that material out of to get everything lined up. We want to make sure that we've got good overlap on the gear mesh. So it looks like we've got plenty of room on this inside, so we're going to bring this gear down. So we're going to grind, we're going to basically grind the bottom, quote unquote bottom of both of these gears to bring everything down. And since these are rotating, or will be rotating at the same speed, I think what we'll do is we're going to take material off of this side on both. Now you don't want to go towards totally flat, because what will happen is you'll ride right up against the ball bearings, or in this case the housing, and we don't want that either. So we want to leave a shoulder if we can on both sides. So I think the best way is going to be to measure the original gears, take off a little bit at a time, and measure the original gears and just compare as we go. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's double check our work. We know we need to be about 9.5. So you can see we still got to go more on this one. We need to take another 0.2 of a millimeter off both. All right, let's measure again. All right, we're getting there. That's pretty close. Let's see how the other gear's looking. So we're about halfway there on this gear, and we're almost there all on the other. Let's take off more material. All right, let's measure again. That's looking pretty good. And there we go. So we got a tiny amount left on this other gear. Let's knock that down right now. So I'm just using a sanding drum, really low RPM, to take a tiny bit of material, and I'm careful not to nick the edge of the teeth. And now let's check the small gear. I'm going to clean the dust up here in a second. So that needed to be a little bit thinner as well. So we're at about 3.5, 3.6 on the stock gear. And we're at 3.75, so about 0.2 of a millimeter need to come off this. All right, this was at about 3.7. We need closer to 3.5. Looks like we're about halfway there. We're looking for that 3.5, and we got 3.4, so we're good here. All right, let's clean everything up, and we'll put it back together. All right, so that took probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes to grind on the gears as necessary. Let's start to throw things back together again. And once you do the single speed lockout mod, you'll have some leftover gears which are actually identical. You'll see that the spec on these two gears line them up, is the same. So it's pretty smart of FMS. It reduces their parts count, and that reduces costs. Just going to assemble it first and see how the fit looks now. There we go. So it's going to be a little hard to see. So that's how the gears should fit. You should see them line up well. If they don't, measure. If you don't have a caliper, this is probably a good way to sort of visualize where you need to be. But remember, we said that this is about a 13 millimeter wide gear case at these two gears. So I just want to check the overall width now. So this is the stack that we're going to measure. It's the middle set of gears. Yes, we're coming in just under that. So I probably took off a little bit too much material, but I think that's better than, well, it's definitely better than not taking off enough, because then you'll end up having binding and the gears won't line up. So we took off about 1/10 too much, but that's to be expected when we're using a Dremel. All right, so let's put everything back together. This is the gear stack that goes in the middle. This is the one on the end. And here's our homemade lockout. All right, so that looks pretty good. At this point, you'd want to use your oil or lube of choice. Didn't quite have enough there, so we're going to grab a little bit of Vanquish grease to throw on these gears. Again, you don't need a crazy amount. Just want to drop some in here so it doesn't run completely dry and rust. Let's get some down in here. It's always the messy part. All right. So that's ready to close back up. And we're going to go ahead and pop this plastic gear out. Just me dropping the metal one in. And let's pull this pin if it comes out. There we go. So if you bought these gears and you attempted to close the gear case, you would have a lot of resistance at this point. And that's because of that sort of over spec or over width metal gear set. It's not a huge deal to grind it down, but that's definitely something that FMS should take care of on the next run of that gear set to ensure better fitment, because if not, a lot of people who don't watch this video or simply don't check are going to find that they have an issue with the gear case being warped if they tighten the bolts, or a lot of pressure on the bearings, or just not a good fit. So now you can see we've got our high-speed gear installed, locked out. And let's put a couple of bolts back in. So if you guys know me from other videos, I make billet parts like wheels and links and chassis parts. And so I really like this platform a lot. I think it's incredible value. So keep an eye out, because we're going to make some parts for it. I'm into racing, so we want performance. So that's spinning nice and free now. That looks good. Perfect. And we've got our lockout installed. And we could leave out some of the gears that came with the metal gear set and some of the plastic gears which we took out of the assembly. So that's what's left over. And now we're ready to install our motor. So this is the high-speed motor. 7.4 volts. Again, I heard there may be some fitment issues with this one. I don't know. We'll find out. So you can see it's definitely sticking proud of this, you might call spur gear. I wonder if we can measure before we install it. We might as well measure how much. So that's 6.8 millimeters. Let's measure again. 6.6. See if we can get a better average. 6.8. All right, so that's what it is. Let's check the other motor. .1. So this is actually sticking out 7. So this is actually sticking out more. So I don't think we have any issue on this motor. I think it's going to go straight in, and we're not going to have an issue with it bottoming out inside the case, because the original one didn't, and this one's shorter. This one shouldn't either. Let's put the motor spec to the outside just for fun. And since this is a metal bolt going into a metal part, the motor bell, let's put a tiny bit of thread lock. One thing I like on this model is that all of the, or so far a lot of the hardware is the same. Looks like an M2x8 bolt, button head bolt, which is nice. Sometimes these 124 scale models use really tiny hardware, and it's hard for me to see and even handle. All right, let's cinch her down. Doesn't look like there's any adjustment on the gear lash here. So we'll just tighten them evenly. Don't have to go crazy on small models and hardware like this. We're just going snug. And we should be good now. Let's put a little bit more grease on the pinion. And I think we're good to reassemble. So 3 bits of hardware on the motor side of the transmission, 4 on the gear cover side, and we've got our high-speed motor and lockout gear installed. These are the holes where the shift shaft previously went through. That's this piece, right? So if you're running in clay or sand or even just dirt, you probably want to plug those up. I think if I take a couple of small bits of hardware, so the M2 is too small, so we're going to need an M2.5 at least, or maybe even an M3 to close it up. So let's go grab them. All right, so looks like an M2.5 and an M3 are going to be the ticket. So on one side, you'll see it's a little smaller. We're going to use the M2.5. So it's going to be the motor side. And on the other side, I want to make sure that we're not putting anything in that doesn't fit right. Let's just double check. This is an M3 by like 5 millimeter. good. And let's make sure everything's spinning freely after putting that hardware in. All right, so definitely feel like the motor has got stronger magnets because it feels much tighter than the stock motor when rotating the gears. That feels pretty good. All right, so that is our high-speed motor install and high-speed lockout installed. So let's put everything back together. Let's get rid of this servo. The other nice benefit of removing the shift servo is you have a lot more room for a larger battery pack, and you're going to need it if you have installed a more powerful motor, because it's going to draw more power and you're going to drive it faster. So we'll keep that in the box of spares. So there's our open chassis. I plan to make some parts for this and I'm pretty excited for it. But let's put this one back together for now. We've got metal diffs and metal drive shafts, which we'll install soon. But I just want to pop this back together. I think while the transmission is out, it's probably easiest to reinstall the drive shafts. These are tiny, tiny bits of hardware. I wish they would have used a hex pin here instead, but we've got a Phillips. Again, just really light. That's why I tend to like 110 scale more than 124. I'm 47 years old at this point, and I got to wear glasses, and I don't have small fingers, so using this hardware will test your patience. When I built the Drift Art EX, and now I have the 3.0, sometimes I get frustrated and just have to walk away because your neck will get tight and you need to give your eyes a break. So if you get to that point, just stop, work on the next day, whatever, but don't force things because that's when stuff breaks. All right, that's our metal gear, high-speed motor install, and we'll do drive shafts at a later date. Let's pop this back in the chassis. And we are gonna slap on this heatsink because we're gonna race this truck and I don't want it to overheat. Should be easy enough. Maybe we can, hopefully we can install it while the transmission is in, but I'm thinking maybe we can't. Let's see if there's room. Nope, looks like we need to, yeah, we definitely need to pull our, is that gonna fit? I guess it will. We're gonna have to pull our transmission back out to get this to slide over the motor. So we'll drop this in the video earlier on so you guys don't make the same mistake, but you need to install your heatsink before reinstalling the transmission and motor. All right, guys. All right, one more call out. You can actually see the heatsink isn't symmetrical. So there's a top and a bottom. So the short side or the small side goes down towards the bottom of the transmission. And then make sure you slide it past the end of the motor and onto the actual body or bell of the motor. All right, let's put this back in. There's a motor here. All right, before we go, I just had to plug it in and see what kind of wheel speed we get. So not really sure what the charge status is on this battery, but it's the original size battery. And we're gonna glue that switch in place because it's making me crazy. There you go. Let me get my fingers out of the way. So it's not my imagination. This is running backwards. And that's interesting because there is no way to plug this in the wrong way. All right, so according to the manual, I know I always said maybe we were gonna solder the leads, but I don't think that's a good idea because we can see some extra components on the back of that little circuit board. So instead, let's follow the manual, which is to turn the transmitter on, hold full throttle, hit reverse, and let's see what happens. All right, so that did the trick. All right, so final thoughts. It's fairly easy, but a little bit disappointing that we have to file those gears down to get them to fit in the case well. So that's certainly something that FMS wants to pay attention to, and hopefully it's something they'll address in later metal gear kits. If not, just follow those instructions to file it down. Can't wait to try this out. We're gonna be racing it this Thursday night at our local Miami backyard track. I've also got the metal links. You can see a little bit better the inverted portals, and you can see where it puts that motor. What I want to do is make a chassis that brings the links closer to parallel and really lowers the CG, so we're working on that now. We might do a Delrin or aluminum or nylon skid, and then some flat carbon rails with a lot of adjustability and tabs to mount your original body. All right, that's the setup. If you guys enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And if you have any comments, drop them in below, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks.